Right, so this video is going to cover Chapter 2 of Groundwork for College Reading. I want to apologize right away. I'm having a little bit of trouble with my headsets. I'm not sure if it's the headset or if it's the computer, but I hope that it doesn't fade in too much as we go along. Anyway, let me just quickly go through this chapter. This is not the most important chapter in the book, but it does introduce how to use a dictionary, both a paper dictionary and even an online dictionary, explaining what the parts of a dictionary entry are. So let me just go through that. The first thing is that with a paper dictionary, the way that you use it in order to find words is you look in the top right-hand or left-hand corner, and there'll always be two words there. Those words are called the guide words, and what they tell you is they tell you both the first and the last word of the words on that page. So in this one, we have cluster is the first word, and you'll see that up in the top left, and then cobra is the last word, and you'll see that down in the bottom right. So these are your guide words so that you know if you're looking for a word, if it's between those two, it will be on that. So one of the common mistakes, or not mistakes, but problems that people have is they say, how can I look up a word if I don't know how to spell it? Spelling is definitely very, very challenging in English. But there are a couple of hints that you can use if you're looking up a word and you think you're spelling it right, but you're not finding it. One thing that you can do is you can imagine that a different vowel is being used than the one you think. So often vowels have the same sound. So if you think it was an A, try putting an I there instead of an A, or put an I in space of an E, or a U in space of an O. So you might want to double check that. The other thing, if you don't find a word that sounds like it begins with PA, you can look like for PE, PI, PO, PU, or PY. All of those ones can start with a sound like P. There's also another hint is that often groups or combinations of letters often sound alike. So if your word isn't spelled with one of the letters in the pair below, then try the other letter in the same pair. So for example, the first one we have is if you think it's spelled with C but you can't find it, try to see if it's spelled with K. Similarly, if you think that it's spelled with a Y, try looking for it with an I or an E. Oftentimes these have the same sounds. Another hint that you can keep in mind is that in English, oftentimes consonants are doubled. So if you can't find it with a single consonant, you can look for it with a double consonant. So for example, we have the word spell, right? Spell is S-P-L-L, not S-P-L. When we're looking at a dictionary definition, a dictionary entry, we're not just going to have the definition there. There's also going to be a variety of other information there as well. So there's 6 different things that can show up in a dictionary entry. The first is the spelling and the syllables. The second is the pronunciation, symbols and accent marks. The third are the parts of speech. The fourth are irregular forms of the words. The fifth are the definitions and meanings, which is what we normally use a dictionary for. And then the last thing is synonyms for each one of these. So the first thing is spelling and syllables. The first thing that you're going to get is how to spell the word. So in this case, we have the word distress, and you'll see that the first entry is distress, right? That it shows you there. It also will give you the syllables with the spelling. So you'll notice that in the dark black, we have one dot between dis and tress, and that tells us that the word is 2 syllables. If you look down at the bottom of the dictionary entry, you see tressed and tressing and tresses. You'll see that with tressed, there's no additional syllable, but with tressing, you see the dot there, which means that you're adding an additional syllable. Tresses, you see a dot and you're adding an additional syllable. So if we look at these ones, we can figure out how many syllables they have. If you look at harsh, there's no dot, so that's going to be one syllable. Rumor, there's one dot, which means there's going to be two syllables. Exception, there's two dots, which means there'll be three syllables. And installment, again, there's two dots, so that means there will be three syllables. The second thing that you will find is pronunciation syllables and accent marks. Now, pronunciation syllables tell you how a word is pronounced, generally pronounced. Keep in mind that there's a variety of different ways of speaking English and that different countries may pronounce things different from one another. The second thing that you have is an accent mark, and the accent mark is telling you where the stress in the word is being placed. So for example, we're looking at the pronunciation syllables inside the parentheses. So after the distress that we just looked at in the dark black, we'll see that we have distress written again, but we have funny vowels that we don't have in written English. So you'll notice that the I has kind of a U or a cup on top of it, as does the E. So the cup on top of the vowels is telling you about the pronunciation of them. The cup, in this case, is telling you that it's a short sound. We'll see later if it was a straight line, it means that it's a long sound. It's not super important that you learn all of these symbols, but just to briefly explain, that's what they mean. The second thing is the accent. You'll notice that after stress, there's a dark apostrophe, and that tells you that the stress of this word is on the second syllable. So it's distress, not distress. So the syllable is in a different place. The accent is in a different place. This chart goes through and tells you the pronunciation of all these different vowels. So the A with a cup on it is like the A in hat, as opposed to the A in pay with the straight line on it is like the A in pay. Again, you may find this interesting, you may not. I personally have always found this a little bit challenging, but again, it's an interesting thing to take a look at if you want. If we take the next thing that we were saying was about the accent marks, we will sometimes have words that have two of these accent marks, and we'll notice that when we have two, at least one is dark and then the other one will be light. But if we look down at these words at the bottom, we have battle that's got two syllables, and we see that the apostrophe is after the bat, which means the stress is on the first syllable. In the second one, disgust, the accent is on the second syllable. Approval, the accent is on the second syllable. Favorable, the accent is on the first syllable. But if we look at this word examination, we'll see that there's actually two accent marks. There's a dark one after nay, and there's a light one after zam. What this means is that there's two types of stress. The primary stress, which is the main stress, which is on na, and a secondary stress, which is on zam. The next thing that it will give you is it's going to give you the part of speech. Now, in English, there's in all languages, there's a variety of parts of speech. The main ones that we tend to talk about are nouns, verbs, and adjectives. We can also talk about adverbs. Oftentimes, a word in English will have two parts of speech, and the dictionary will give you the definition for both of those parts of speech. So in this box, it gives you the symbols, not the symbols, the letters, or the groups of letters, the abbreviations that are used for each of these different types of parts of speech. Another thing that will be given, the fourth thing, is going to be irregular forms of words. So when we talk about irregular forms of words, oftentimes we're talking about irregular spellings of either the past tense or the continuous tense, or any time that basically you have to make a change that's not the normal way of spelling it. So for example, draw, the past tense is drew, not drawed, and then the past participle is drawn. For lazy, we have to change it to lazier and laziest, and the difference is that we change that Y to an I rather than normally just adding an ER. The same is true for city. For good, we have these irregular forms of better and best. And for high, we have also higher and best. The last thing is that you're going to have the second to last thing is you're going to have the definition. And as we said before, there'll often be more than one definition, even more than one definition for the same part of speech. So if we look at this sentence, I suspect the exam is going to be all essay questions. What definition makes the most sense? To regard as likely or probable, to distrust or doubt, to think of as guilty without proof? Well, in this case, the thing that makes the most sense is the first definition. So we can look at these definitions and figure out which one makes the most sense. If the first one doesn't make sense, then we should go on to the second and the third and so on. The last thing that you're going to have in a dictionary entry is synonyms. Now, a synonym is a word that has the same or at least a similar meaning to the word that you're looking up. So, for example, if we looked up the word help, aid and assist are two synonyms. Synonyms can be useful if we're trying to write something in our own words without using the same words as an author. There's also a special type of dictionary which is called a thesaurus, which doesn't really have definitions. All it has is synonyms and also antonyms, which are words that mean the opposite. You can get a paper dictionary, or you can certainly there's a lot of apps with thesauruses as well. Okay, so go ahead and take a look through this chapter. Again, we're not going to be tested on this, but if you're interested in learning how to use a dictionary better, you can use this information. Take care. Bye.